to help you navigate your legal, your financial, and your caregiving options as it pertains to dementia. Like I said, my name is Sam Meyer. I am a member of the CGH Foundation Board of Trustees. I'm also a financial planner with Edward Jones Investments, or financial advisor with Edward Jones Investments. The board decided to focus on dementia as its campaign for, or as its focus rather, for the 2023 campaign for a number of reasons, but it was primarily sparked by a bequest from Hugh and Betty Miller, longtime residents of the area that operated Hugh Miller Insurance in Rock Falls. Betty, who's also Joan's mother, had lived with dementia for more than 10 years before passing away in 2020. And it was Betty and then Hugh's wish to make sure that resources were provided for educational purposes in the community. So this is part of where this is all coming from today. I just wanted to note that up front. I wanted to thank Joe Landmichl. Joe is with us today from the Alzheimer's Association. I want to thank the Alzheimer's Association for partnering with us in this program. We really appreciate it. Take a ball. Not yet. Hold that thought. I'm not done hearing myself speak yet. Now, we do have a wonderful group of presentations tonight. Today's focus is going to be about your first steps in navigating the dementia journey. So what some of those legal aspects and financial aspects are. The next one will be more devoted directly towards financial matters next month. We have a great group. I will note there are retired attorneys in here, there are former attorneys in here, there are current attorneys in here, which sounds like a terrible start to a joke. It really does, but I think we should get a lot of good information. I will note that obviously this is a very complex issue with a lot of moving parts. We don't expect anyone to come away as an expert in these matters today. I think if you can come away with some of a broad understanding of what's being discussed, and more importantly know what questions to ask and the type of people to ask them to, we will have done a great service and done what we're looking to accomplish for here today, okay? So we'll hear from Joe in a minute. Also with us, I'll have you guys give us just a quick wave here for a minute. Tim Scordato, we're gonna hear from Tim today. He's a staff attorney with the Northwestern Illinois Area Agency on Aging. Did you name that, Tim, or is it?
No, we need a short. We just go by NIA.
Okay, NIA, Northwestern Illinois Area Agency on Aging. We have Jamie Long with us tonight. Jamie is the CEO of Golder Care Solutions in Moline. It's a care management and advocacy agency. Obviously, Jamie will tell us a little bit about what he does shortly. We have Carly Johnett with us. She's the RSVP Director and Outreach Coordinator for Lifescape Community Services, also based out of Rockford. That's kind of a mouthful too, Carly. No, that's all right. And then finally, we have Mark and Margaret Zumdoll with us, longtime members of the community. I should note that when I first moved to town 15 years ago, Mark and Margaret were some of the first people I met and got to know a little bit. So a lot of fond memories from our first time being here. So good to see them today. Margaret has battled dementia for the last 6 years, I believe, and she's going to tell us a little bit about her journey and where they are with their battle. So without further ado, do me a big favor. I'd like to welcome Joe Landmichl from the Alzheimer's Association.
I'm going to go that way.
You want this mic? Yep. Okay.
Okay. All right. So real quick, I'd like to see a show of hands. How many of you joined us for our community forum 2 months ago? On June 28th. How many in here did? About half. So I want to thank you for coming back, and I definitely want to thank those who are not here for coming today. So my name is Joe. I am with the Alzheimer's Association, and I just want to reiterate, I want to personally thank Joan and the board of CGH, because it was them that said, put together a presentation for the board of directors. We want to talk about making this the year of dementia education, and really they are the local heroes. They are the driving force behind bringing this education to not only the city of Sterling, but the county of Whiteside and Carroll County and Ogle County and Lee County, all the counties they service with their 14 other clinics. It's really CGH. So I want to make sure to put that and say thank you to CGH for doing this with us. Okay, so I'm going What is the difference, and keep in mind, I'm gonna need to make sure somebody flags me when I get to like 15 minutes, because I can really talk, and I was already pre-told by the table to sum it down, because this is a 60-minute presentation done in 20. So I'm gonna ask you all real quick, what's the difference between Alzheimer's and dementia? What's the difference? Who wants to take a guess? And not our people in the field. Not those, because you guys know the difference. What do you think? Yeah.
I've learned that dementia is a form of, Alzheimer's is a form of dementia.
Ah, very good. So I'm going to knock on wood, because I don't believe I have it, but if I was to come into this room and say, I have cancer, what's the first question you ask somebody when they say, I have cancer? We always say, what kind? Why is that drilled in our brains for cancer? But when somebody says, I have dementia, we never ask what kind. There's over 70 forms of dementia. Alzheimer's is the biggest of all the dementias. So when people say, I have dementia, you need to ask them what kind, because there are so many kinds. How many of you have ever heard of Robin Williams in this room? Okay, what did Robin Williams die of? Yeah, he died of Lewy body dementia, which is what caused him to commit suicide. Those with Lewy body dementia will actually be more prone to committing suicide. And so a lot of people don't know that. And if you have at home Peacock or YouTube, look up a movie called Robin's Wish. It's a documentary done by his wife that talks about his journey and how he was misdiagnosed with Parkinson's disease, which is a dementia, and he actually had Lewy body disease. And it's a really good way to really learn some of the other dementias that are out there, to really see what others go through. So we'll go ahead and we will skip actually the next two. So for this, my lovely assistant Joan has to keep clicking the next button. So we will skip forward past the objectives. You can still see the clock. Okay, I should really put a timer on.
I have one.
Okay, good. Joan has one on. Okay, so keep going past impact. Okay, so we're going to test your knowledge, and in this room, we're just going to do a show of hands. So let's go and ask the first question. So the first question is going to be, this is what's going to eat my time up. Okay, approximately how many Americans are currently living with Alzheimer's disease? How many of you think over 3 million? Couple hands. What about over 6 million? Okay, a couple more. 8 million? More hands. What about 11 million? So most of you think 11 million. Well, the answer is actually in the United States. I'll go ahead and click on more than 6 million Americans. There are more than 6 million Americans living with Alzheimer's disease today. All right. Oh, she clicked the wrong one. That's okay. We can do this one. All right. Now, what about unpaid caregivers? We're not talking about those paid. The actual caregivers at home agency. We're talking all of you who may be caregivers that don't receive a dime to take care of your loved one. How many are we dealing with? How many say about 8 million? What about 11 million? Okay, 14 million? More than 18 million. All right, so keep in mind, think of all the people who are paid, but the unpaid is over 11 million unpaid caregivers out there caring for somebody with dementia. That's just mind-blowing. Think about that. You work 40 hours, you come home, you now have to care for your loved one, and oh, by the way, my cousin has this disease at the age of 52, and my aunt is in the late stages of Alzheimer's at the age of 65. So my mom is one of these 11 million unpaid caregivers caring for my aunt, and then my other aunt is an unpaid caregiver for my cousin. All right, so let's go ahead and continue on. We'll skip, actually play this one. Let's play knowing the facts. You may not hear the music, but we'll still play it. Oh, well, it's going so fast. All right, so we can click next. So as you can see on the screen, I mean, the numbers are just staggering. So let's go ahead and let's continue on. I believe he's going to ask a couple more questions. I know you're all like, really? I didn't expect to go to class today. But that's okay, we're all in class. All right, so let's go ahead and hit next. So true or false, Alzheimer's disease is a normal part of the aging process. Who says true? Wow, nobody. Who says false? All right, that is absolutely true. It is false, okay? Yes, you had to do that there. It is false. This is not a normal part of the aging process, because if it was, every single person would know somebody with this disease. All right, so let's go ahead and test the next one. So true or false, people younger than 65 can get Alzheimer's disease. See, I've given this so much that I already know what's coming on the screen next. True or false, who says true?
True.
That is absolutely true. People younger than 65, there's over 200,000 Americans living with this disease today that are under the age of 65. My cousin, of course, is one of them, and his did not come due to genetics. His came because he was an alcoholic in his 20s and into his early 30s. And we know substance abuse increases your risk of this disease by 2.5 times. So we believe that is why he was diagnosed so early with it. All right, so let's continue on. All right, we're going to skip the videos, and I'm just going to explain since we don't have the sound on, so we can skip this one. So what Dr. Schneider's talking about is there's 2 genes in Alzheimer's. There's a deterministic gene, and then there is a deterministic gene and a risk gene. Deterministic genes are extremely rare. That means your mom had it, your dad had it, your mom's mom and dad had it, your dad's mom and dad had it. Like literally everybody in the family gets it. Very, very rare. The risk gene means that your mom had it, maybe your mom's mom had it, but people in the family seem to have it. That's a risk gene, which increases your risk on average about 14% to potentially getting this disease as you get older. Now keep in mind, after the age of 65, your chance of getting this disease does increase, and after the age of 85, it goes up 37%. So again, age is the greatest known risk factor, but Alzheimer's is not a normal part of the aging process. So please keep that in mind. 1 in 3 seniors, when they pass away, will have some form of dementia. That's not 2 in 3, that's not 3 in 3, it's 1 in 3. So dementia is not a normal part of the aging process. All right, let's go ahead and hit next. What's my time? Oh geez, I'm on 11 minutes already. Okay, let's keep going. I told you, I'm getting it down as quickly as I can. All right, so we're gonna skip the expert here, because we can't hear her anyways. All right, so we will skip Dr. Carrillo, and I will go through the facts. Okay, so in here what Dr. Carrillo said is this disease was discovered over 100 years ago by Dr. Alzheimer's. Now the thing to remember though is with Alzheimer's disease, we don't know 100% what causes this. With cancers, we kind of have an idea of, yes, if you smoke a lot, you could potentially get cancer. If you have asbestos, you could get this kind of cancer. Alzheimer's, we don't know. We know things that elevate risk. For instance, me being a bigger guy in my 30s, I'm 2 times more likely by the time I get to be 60 to have a form of dementia. So I'm working on my weight. We do know that head injuries increase your risk. We know over drinking increases your risk. So we know risk factors, but we don't know 100% the true element that could cause you to get this disease. We also know that, again, as we age, the brain is going to age differently based on different things. So if you get a head injury, it's going to kill the neurons in the brain. And there are over 100 billion neurons in the brain, with a B, 100 billion neurons. Each neuron touches something in your brain 7,000 times. So when you think, oh, as I'm younger, teenager, and I drink, it's okay if I kill some neurons, right? Well, for every neuron you kill, you're killing 7,000 touch points. So again, we want to protect the brain. All right, we'll continue on next. Okay, risk factors. Let's go to some more questions. All right, next one. Now, if you get this wrong, we're going to have some problems. All right, what is the greatest known risk factor to Alzheimer's disease? Who says genetics? Okay, who says family history? Who says age? All right, all of these are risk factors, but age is the greatest known risk factor for this disease. All right, let's go ahead and continue on. All right, we're going to skip our expert, keep going, because she's just going to tell you about those genes I just told you about, the risk and deterministic genes. Oh wait, no, go back real quick. I do want to cover this page though, because Joan has this as you first walk in. These are populations, unfortunately, that are at even higher risk. So those who are Hispanic are actually 1.5 times more likely to get Alzheimer's disease. Those who are Black are actually twice as likely, but almost 2/3 of Americans are women. Women are more likely to get this disease. The reason for that is still unknown. There are studies going on that look at the chromosomes that women carry that men tend not to, and how it interacts with different food sources. So I will say this. There is going to be a special program in March coming with scientists that are looking into this, and Joan will, of course, fill you in once we get more information on that. All right, so we'll hit next. Where am I at? Oh, I only got 8 minutes left. Oh, geez. Okay, here we go. Keep going, keep going. All right, so stages of Alzheimer's. So let's go ahead, and in this case, skip forward. We're going to play the video, and then we're going to pause it when it gets to a certain part. Okay, so hold on. Oh, no, hit back. It's going to automatically play, which will give me the slides I need. So give it a minute. It's going to play. Here we go. Okay, so when it talks about Alzheimer's as a continuum, this is what Alzheimer's, again, starts with. We start in the very beginning stages where there's really, we don't notice, but something's going on in the brain that we're not really seeing. Remember that Alzheimer's disease starts 20 years before it shows any type of ugly symptoms or ugliness that comes out. It is starting 20 years in advance. But then we start to move, and this is pretty big. It's called MCI, which is mild cognitive impairment, which is why you want to see your doctor, because there is more studies going on that look at mild cognitive impairment and what the elevated risks are if nothing is really done at an earlier stage. Mild cognitive impairment can take up to 5 years and can turn into Alzheimer's disease, but again, this is being looked at because this really is kind of the early stage to see what's really going on. And definitely Dr. Joseph and the other doctor coming for the ecoms class can tell you more, because I'm not a true doctor, I just listen to them. Okay, but then we go into the 3 stages of Alzheimer's. So the early stage is also known as mild. This is where, again, that they're going to start to, your symptoms are going to start to interfere with daily life. So you may start to forget some words and say, hey, I need that thing we put food on. Well, we know it as plate, but because their brain can't think of it, they can't use that. So they're going to start describing terms versus words. Then we go into the middle stages. This is where you're going to start to really see people pulling back, because it's just uncomfortable to go places because you may not know where you are, you may not know the words. But then we move into the late stage, or also known as severe, which is where my aunt is. And this is where they're going to start mimicking. They're going to start literally talking to themselves potentially, because in their mind, they're seeing people in the room, or they're seeing their reflection and think it's somebody else. They struggle with swallowing, because with Alzheimer's disease, in the very end, your brain forgets how to eat, it forgets how to breathe, and it is a deadly disease. There is no cure as of now, but there are trials out there that people are on. There's other drugs that have been approved that show the potential to slow the progress of this disease. So we're hoping one day we're going to get there to end this disease. But again, this is the current stages of Alzheimer's. All right, let's continue on, and we'll hit next again. I got it. 30 seconds.
5.5 minutes.
Oh, 5.5 minutes. Whew, okay. All right, FDA approved treatment. So let's hit next. Okay, so this is to show you the progression of where we've been in the last 100 years. So the disease was discovered back in the 1900s in 1906, but it wasn't until 1996 that we actually had a drug that treated the symptoms for a very short period of time. And all of these drugs you see on here are still used to this day to help treat the symptoms. It doesn't work forever, and it doesn't work in everybody. My aunt, these drugs do not work in at all. So again, each person is going to be a little different. And Mark and Margaret will talk later. They can tell you more about aducanumab because they are proof. Margaret is proof from taking this drug of the potential it has. But this is the latest drug to be approved in the Alzheimer's fight to potentially slow and stop this disease. Now, there are some other drugs currently in the pipeline, like Lilly and a few others, that are made more for the middle stages. And hopefully in the next 3 years, we hear those getting approved through the FDA as well. All right, so let's continue on. So that leads us into, let's see here. Okay, we need to skip this one. All right, so this leads us into trials. So trials are big, and this is why people ask all the time. They say, well, if there's no cure, why should I even go get a diagnosis? Well, the reason why, and let's continue forward, is due to Trial Match. And Trial Match is a service that you can call our helpline, and you can ask to be put on the Trial Match. And what Trial Match is it is a free service that we offer that will ask you specific questions about the disease you have, your loved one has, or just may ask you, your mom had it in the future, you could be part of a trial that might be looking at things. And Trial Match, there's over 670 trials going on right now in the lower 48 states. And they are everything from an actual drug like Lilly is, that's testing to see if it works to slow the progression on some people. There's other tests out there that are looking at food. Remember I told you about women are more likely, and they're seeing is it how certain foods interact with chromosomes. There's also tests like my boss is on. And she is on a test where she doesn't have the disease, but her grandmother had it and her grandmother's mom had it. And she is on a 10-year study where they email her a test every year for the next 10 years, the same exact test. And if they notice over the next 10 years she's answering differently, they'll move her into another cognitive trial. So trials aren't really just for people who have the disease. Trials are for everybody. They can be cognitive, they can be food related, or they can be medicine related. And we want you to get on the Trial Match because, again, you can donate money left and right. But if we don't have people out there actually on trials, we're not going to be able to find out how we can end this disease one day. So the website's right there, alz.org/trialmatch, or you can call the 800 number and they can get you signed up. And what it does is it's going to ask you specific questions. And then from there, it's going to tell you, here's trials you might qualify for, and here's the numbers on how to get a hold of the people doing the trials. All right, we'll hit next. I know I got about a minute left. Let's go back. 2 minutes, resources. Okay, here we go. Hit next twice. Okay, so the first resource we're going to talk about is the 24/7 helpline. So how many of you have ever called the helpline in here? Okay, we've got at least a few more hands, which is good. Take down this number. You're not going to regret it. It is 1-800-272-3900. You can call the helpline day or night. It's literally 24/7. You can ask, oh, it's on the cards too, you have. It's also on your printouts that I got. But you can call them and ask them any questions you have about Alzheimer's disease, what drugs are available. You can also call them if you're a caregiver. How many of you in here are a caregiver? All right, let's say it's 1 a.m, your loved one is up, walking around, they won't go to bed, you don't know what to do. You can call the helpline at 1 a.m, tell them what's happening, and they will help you with some ideas to try with your loved one to get them back into bed. They are a crisis line, they are a helpline for just general questions, so give them a call. We also have our website, and then of course we have alz.org/CRF, which will help you find local resources instead of just going to Google. So these are just 3 of the main resources we do have, but I can't stress enough, the helpline, please call. And if you're a caregiver, call and ask for what's called a care consultation. Care consultations are 100% free. You do not need to have insurance. They will immediately transfer you to a master level clinician for over 35 to 45 minutes. They will ask you about your loved one's diagnosis. They will ask you specific questions, and they will then email you free of charge a care plan for the next year. That's going to say, if you see the following behaviors, here's how you're going to react. If you have questions for your doctor, here's the questions to ask. Did you know about the following medicines? Did you know about this? It's going to be a care plan you can get every single year, free of charge. You can call every year, and then you can share it with your friends. You can share it with the doctors. So ask for a care consultation. But make sure you have at least 45 minutes to be able to talk to the master level clinician. With that being said, I'm going to turn it now back to Sam. I'll take questions at the very end, and I'll give it to you, Sam.
I think that
I think that customized care plan sounded amazing, really. That's certainly one of the things I took away from your presentation. Thank you so much, Joe. A lot of great information. As he mentioned, we'll have a chance to ask Joe some questions at the end. But for now, I'd like to introduce our panel. I'm going to say a few words about you, and as I introduce you, if you guys wouldn't mind coming up and taking your place on stage, I would appreciate it. Today, we're going to hear first from Mark and Margaret Zumdoll. Margaret owned and operated Accents, which is a gift shop out at the Northland Mall, I remember, for more than 11 years. And Mark is a retired attorney from Ward Murray Pace and Johnson, who dealt with estate planning and many other issues for Ward Murray Pace and Johnson. They're going to share a little bit about their journey. As I mentioned, Margaret has been diagnosed with Alzheimer's for more than 6 years, and they're going to talk about how it's affected them and tell us a little bit about their story. Then we'll hear from Tim Scordato. As I mentioned, Tim is a staff attorney with Northwestern Illinois Area Agency on Aging. Tim's going to speak to some of the basics of legal planning and determining legal capacity. So a lot of high-level topics here. Every day there are folks who do not get the level of legal representation that they need, and it's part of the Illinois Agency, Area Agency on Aging. What'd you call it? NIA? Is that what you said? Yeah. It's NIA's mission. Thank you, Tim. To make sure that they change that. So Tim's going to talk a little bit about Prairie State Legal Services as well and how they provide legal help to folks. Jamie Long is with us today. As I mentioned, Jamie is the CEO of Golder Care Solutions in Moline. Jamie is a former attorney, and he started Golder Care as a care management and advocacy agency for elder care issues. As a benefits advocate, he advises clients on long-term care planning and decisions. And as I mentioned, he's a former elder care attorney. And then finally, we'll hear from Carly Jonnet. Carly is the RSVP Director and Outreach Coordinator for Lifescape Community Services based out of Rockford. Lifescape is the largest agency in Northwestern Illinois, serving older adults, families, and caregivers in Winnebago, Boone, Whiteside, Carroll, Lee, and Ogle counties. If a person needs a nutritious meal or help to complete complicated paperwork, assistance in bill paying, that's some of what Carly and her staff does. So, enough of me talking. Please welcome Mark and Margaret Zumdoll.
Thank you, Sam. Can you guys hear me? Yeah. Okay. Hey, Margaret's going to tell a little bit about how our journey started. So, turn it over to Margaret.
My family has a long history with Alzheimer's. My mother died from it. Many of my aunts and uncles and cousins died from it. My younger brother, who's only 62 years old, is in the final. Okay. My younger brother, who is only 62, is in the final stages of this. So it is something I have lived with my whole adult life. In 2015, I became confused on a trip to Iowa City I had made many times before. I suspected Alzheimer's. I started with my family doctor, who referred me to a neuropsychologist that involves memory testing. She suggested I consult a neurologist specializing in memory issues. I first had an MRI that showed a normal scan. Then I had a spinal tap to see if my spinal fluid contained telltale proteins that indicate Alzheimer's. I remember the doctor's visit when I would discover the test test results. I was hoping for the best, but I knew the odds were against me. Diagnosis, Alzheimer's. It is devastating. What I needed most that day was some hope. I needed to hear about a drug trial, breakthrough, some new research, anything to cushion the news I I felt anger and fear. I eventually replaced these negative feelings with a more positive focus. I vowed to keep living as best as I could, and I do everything I could to find a cure. That was 6.5 years ago, and I'm still fighting and having fun.
Well, I just want to add, again, I'm very proud of Margaret. She's very brave and has done everything she could. We've done every research opportunity that we've had. We've worked a lot with Northwestern University and their research program. Margaret also was involved and is still involved in a drug trial with the new drug that was approved by the FDA, now called Aduhelm. And so she's been taking that drug for several years and gets an infusion every 4 weeks for that. And it's not a cure, but we're thinking that it has slowed the progression of the disease. And to reiterate what Joe said, we learned about the trial through Trial Match, which indicates what's being studied and also what the criteria are and where it's located. So we did a little research on our own and thought that this was a really good trial. We called the number that was listed there, talked to the director, the trial coordinator, and got involved. And that's been 4 years ago. So I would recommend a diagnosis because in order to be eligible for a lot of these trials, you have to have a diagnosis because, again, as Joe said, there's many forms of dementia. And if your trial is specifically for Alzheimer's, they want to make sure that you do have Alzheimer's disease. And it used to be the only way you could diagnose Alzheimer's was through an autopsy involving dissection of the brain. But now there are biomarkers like spinal tap or spinal fluid, and they're also developing less invasive tests to determine whether or not a person has Alzheimer's. So again, I highly recommend the resources that the Alzheimer's Association has available. Really good.
I think it's because if you want to turn off this one.
Turn this one on.
Yeah.
We should have ours on.
Because you're too close, so you only have one at a time. So this one's just automatic. You got it turned off back there?
Okay, they did.
Okay.
I have so many limitations, but this is really one of the most pronounced. Thank you very much for your story and for those impactful words. Now I'd like to turn it over to Tim. Tim, would you tell us a little bit about what you do, Prairie State Legal Services, and anything you were hoping to share with us today?
Yes, can you hear me okay? Yes. Good. So again, my name is Tim Scordato. I work for the Northwestern Illinois Area Agency on Aging. It's a mouthful. Again, we just call it NIA. One of our provider agencies is Prairie State Legal Services. They offer free legal representation for anybody 60 or older. I also help out with some legal services myself at NIA. I focus on high impact litigation, but I also offer advice for older adults or people with disabilities calling in and they just want to know more about their legal rights and duties. NIA provides coordination for government services within the 9 counties in Northern Illinois. Of course, this is one of the counties. I just want to give a very brief hypothetical, because I know that a lot of this can be very confusing when it comes to legal planning, and everybody's facts are different. So everybody's situation is different when it comes to legal planning. Not everybody should have a trust, maybe not even everybody should have a will, maybe not everybody should have a power of attorney, although generally speaking, most people should have a power of attorney for healthcare. So I just want to give a very brief hypothetical here. Let's say there's a couple, Jack and Mary, and let's say Jack is starting to have signs of dementia. They want to start their legal planning. What they're going to want to do first is go to a doctor, get diagnosed. If the doctor says that it's Alzheimer's or that it's dementia, or possibly even some other disease, maybe they just want to start their legal planning out early, which I very highly recommend. You want to start your legal planning at least 5 years prior to the time that you think you might want to go into a skilled nursing home. And the reason for that is because Medicaid has a 5-year look-back period. And if you transfer any of your assets within that 5-year look-back period, you could be penalized, which means that you might be on the hook for paying very expensive nursing home costs. So let's say this, I think I call them Jack and Mary. So let's say Jack and Mary, they get the diagnosis. They want to know, okay, what do we do next? They're looking at what we call in the legal field is advanced directives. And this can mean many different things. It can basically, a certain kind of advanced directive might be a living will. It might be a power of attorney. It might be something that they call now that many people use, it's called a post form. This is a physician order for life-sustaining treatment. Generally speaking, what most people are going to want is a power of attorney for healthcare. And the reason why I say that is because when it comes to something like a living will, you can write down your wishes for what you want should you become incapacitated in the future and you may not be able to make medical decisions for yourself. However, those situations may not arise. There's all sorts of situations that can come up in a hospital, in the nursing home, and you may not even imagine them coming up. So that's why it's important to have somebody who you trust to be what they call your agent under power of attorney. You might hear some of these phrases like agent and principal and guardianship and ward. All that means is agent is somebody who acts on your behalf, you being the principal. They're going to act on your behalf should you become incapacitated. Or there's a power of attorney that you can set up that takes into effect automatically. So let's say Jack and Mary, they want this power of attorney that takes effect automatically. In Illinois, there's what they call a statutory short form power of attorney. Now, I think everybody might have my card. If you don't, I have my cards up front at the main table there. If you want to know more about the statutory short form, if you want to know more about powers of attorney, or really any civil matter, give me a call. I can explain it a little bit more. Like I mentioned, everybody's situation is different. But let's say for Jack and Mary, they go with the power of attorney short form. They have one person witness the form. It does not need to be notarized. There is a notarized part on the form where it can be notarized, but it does not legally need to be notarized. And what this is going to do, let's say Jack appoints Mary to be his agent under power of attorney. So Mary can now act at any time. Mary can act right now for Jack's sake. What I mean by that is that Mary can access Jack's medical records. Mary can make medical decisions for Jack. If once Jack passes, Mary could even determine what happens to Jack's remains. So I generally recommend the medical power of attorney. And again, the reason for that is because all sorts of situations arise. And then also the reason for that is because anything you can put into a living will, you can also put into a power of attorney. So a power of attorney really acts as a living will as well. Now there's other sorts of advanced directives. There's a do not resuscitate order. As I mentioned, there's the post form. I usually recommend against the post form, but if you have other questions about these, please please feel free to ask. Past that, what Jack and Mary are going to want to do is they're going to want to either set up some sort of a will or a trust, or possibly even both, depending on their situation. And the difference between a will and a trust, generally speaking, is that a will is going to need to be probated. You're going to have to go to court if you have a will. A trust, you don't need to go to court. You're going to have a trustee acting on your behalf after you pass, or Jamie has a pamphlet here, the real reason you need a revocable living trust. I think everybody has it on their table. And there are some things such as living trusts, and the trustee can act on your behalf while you're alive as well. So that being said, once Jack and Mary set in place their power of attorney, once they set in place their trust and their will, those are I would say the basics. Those are the foundations. Past that, I do highly recommend speaking to an attorney. My services at NIA are free. As I mentioned before, the services at Prairie State Legal are also free. And then one more thing, because my supervisor wanted me to ask, if anybody is interested in being on the council of NIA, please see me afterwards. I'd be happy to talk to you. And what that means is that you'll be able to make decisions. You'll be able to vote and help make decisions for all older adults within the 9-county area.
If you're on the council, can you change the name, or is that?
You can recommend a name change.
Nicolay can't go.
No.
Thank you very much, Tim. So just to summarize and say everyone's situation is different. Please seek out individual legal care. Directives like healthcare's and powers of attorney give someone the right to act on your behalf while you're alive. And then the will and trust types of instruments are how to get assets from point A to point B after you pass away. Thank you very much. Because we're going to share, some information, there'll be some overlap. If anyone has questions specifically for Tim, we can take a couple before I move over to Jamie. We'll also have time at the back end to answer all of your questions as well. But just want to make sure maybe while Tim's presentation is fresh on someone's mind, if anyone jotted something down, I'm happy to bring the mic by and let you ask Tim a question directly. So does anyone have a question for Tim at all? Yeah, Joan.
What's involved with emergency guardianship?
So Joan asked, what is involved with emergency guardianship?
Yeah. So let me first explain what a guardianship is. What a guardianship is, it's kind of similar to a power of attorney, except a guardianship is appointed by the court. When it comes to a power of attorney, that's something that you do yourself, and then you can present the document to your doctor or whomever you want to acknowledge that power of attorney document. A lot of times they may not acknowledge it, in which case you might have to petition for guardianship. When it comes to emergency guardianship, in some cases, on the onset of an emergency, the court will issue a temporary guardian within a short amount of time. Otherwise, guardianships can take a long time. They're very similar to, I would analogize them to a divorce proceeding when a child is at play here, because they're going to issue a best interest test. So they're looking at what are the best interests of what they call the ward, or the older adult, or the person who does not have the competency. So when it comes to
the court choose who the guardian is?
the court always chooses who the guardian is. You can recommend in your power of attorney document, or even in your will, who you might want the guardian to be. In the will, who you want the guardian to be for your child, and the power of attorney document, who you might want the guardian to be for yourself. This is just a recommendation. The court is going to have the ultimate say in the matter.
Is guardianship then is irreversible?
Is guardianship irreversible, I believe was the question.
No, it's not irreversible. And what can happen is that it can be revoked by somebody else, and it can also be revoked by the ward, the person who is being looked after by the guardian. So let's say a ward is being mistreated by the guardian. The ward can have their own legal representation, come to court and petition that the guardianship be revoked or changed in some fashion.
Unless they don't have legal capacity.
Even if the ward is not considered competent, and they wouldn't be considered competent if they are a ward, they can still have legal counsel to represent them and revoke the guardianship.
And similarly, powers of attorney can be revoked as well, right?
That's correct. A power of attorney can be revoked in many different ways. You can tear it up, you can burn it if you want. I always recommend to revoke it in writing, sign it, and date it, and also present it to everybody who you gave it to. Otherwise, they're not going to know that it's been revoked. So if you revoke your power of attorney, sign it, date it, and then present it to your primary care physician, local hospitals, the nursing home that you might be at.
Advice. I think we have time for one more question. Did I see one over here for Tim?
In general, I've heard that you don't need a trust unless you have a lot of money. Is that true?
Oh, loaded question. Okay, in general, I've heard that you don't need a trust unless you have a lot of money. Your thoughts there, Tim?
It depends on everybody's situation. Money is not necessarily the only factor. However, I will say it is a factor. For example, if you die without a will, you die what they call intestate. And what that, in simpler terms, means is that the state of Illinois has basically already written a will for you. And what that means is that your spouse is going to receive half of half of the assets are going to go to the spouse, and then the other half are going to go to the children or beneficiaries, the heirs. So I would say that it's one factor, but it's not the only factor. And the reason for that is because there's lots of reasons why you might want to trust. One of them being, as Jamie put in here, sometimes the power of attorney will not be acknowledged at banks. So maybe you want to set up a living trust so that will be acknowledged. And I think Jamie might speak a little bit more about that. I'll just say that it's one factor.
Thank you very much, and I promise we'll be able to ask a few more questions here at the end. I'd like to turn it over to Jamie. Jamie, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do and how you came to be here tonight.
Can you hear me? I won't spend much time on that. I started practicing law. Well, first I went to med school and decided that wasn't for me, and then I went into law. So this is kind of a perfect confluence for me. I like to say that I started doing elder law before there was elder law, okay? Elder law didn't come about until about 1986 or 87, and I was already solidly into it by that time. The man who took over my law office actually studied it in law school. So when people wondered, you're turning it over to him, I'd said, well, I had to learn it the hard way. He actually studied it, so he probably knows it better than I do. I started Golder Care about 15 years ago, and it really it allows us to get a little more comprehensive. When you talk about dealing with the care issues, when you talk about dealing with the finance issues and the cost issues, when you talk about dealing with what we call the compliance issues and not falling into pits. Can talk about that a lot, but that's not what we're really here for today. I think there is a sheet that was included in your packet that says, here's some of the stuff that Golder Care can do. If you're at all interested, look at our website or contact me. I also had in there, we have started something called the Empowered Living Club. I'm not going to spend much time on it, but it is a club for all of us who are dealing with aging. If you're 18 and over, or a member of the United States, if you are a member of the lay public, or if you are a professional. Just about everybody in this room is eligible for membership. It's like $10 a year, but for those who come to all three of these, it will be comped out for next year, so you can talk to Joan or whomever, Joe or whoever. And we can talk about that later. I was the first elder law attorney in this region of the country. And so, as I said, I learned it the hard way. And everything that your people have been telling you is absolutely right on the mark. Joan, the point that you just brought up is that if I've been adjudicated disabled and I want to get out of it, it may be difficult to get a lawyer for me to hire a lawyer because I'm not competent. In those cases, you brought back to me a case of about 25 years ago, and it was in this community. And I had somebody do that, and I simply asked the court to name me as the personal lawyer, okay? So you can, that's a way around it. Or somebody else could hire them for you. But at any rate, that's something that can be gotten around. We're in a big hurry tonight, so with that in mind, we're talking about first steps and your legal plan. So I want to make just a few points. Number one, when you're dealing with your own care or another person's care, this is not a transaction, okay? It's a project, okay? My father-in-law was a lawyer for 70 years. He was a smart man. He would practice from age 25 to 95. He once bought a car. That was a transaction. He bought a car, and he never had the oil changed. And the engine burned out. And when they tease him about it, well, it came from the factory with it. It's not a transaction, Roy. It's a project. You buy a house, you buy a car, whatever you're doing. You do an estate plan, you keep it up to date. When you start doing any of the kind of work that we do, the fastest way to fail is to view it as a transaction. Well, I just have to make a decision as to who to get for mom's caregiver, or where are we going to place her, or which one of these trials are we going to get into, or treating them all as a bunch of individual decisions. This is a coordinated piece. And as we were just talking about, you know, that plan that the Alzheimer's Association starts, that's a good start to that. It must be viewed as a project, okay? I cannot overemphasize that. It sounds very simplistic. It sounds almost difficult to understand that difference. But that is the main key, I would say. I was going to say, we don't have enough time, I was going to say, you know, write this down. Life is more important than death. Okay, well, I think we all know that. And that means that life planning is more important than death. If you look on a timeline, we are here. And as we move forward, eventually each of us will die. So that moves our timeline into two sections. Now, between now and the time we die, and after we're gone. After we're gone is important. We all can agree. But it's even more important that we plan for our lives. Traditional estate planning has a tendency to focus on death and taxes. It talks about doing a will. Yes, it's important to do a will, just as Tim was saying. It's important to do a will, and the main reason I want to have a will is even if I got somebody spending down on care, I have an estate plan that's on paper. But a will doesn't take effect until I'm dead, okay? A power of attorney I can put in place right now, and it can stay in place until I die. And as Tim was mentioning, I also, 50 Plus Lifestyles, we write for them. I don't know if you folks get that up here. This is the September issue, and you got a copy of this article. It's not a solicitation or anything like that, but it's about revocable living trusts. One of the things that I like is that I am not a lawyer. I don't make money from the things that lawyers do, and so I can heartily recommend the services of lawyers without being accused of self-serving, okay? You need to have a lawyer. LegalZoom may have its place, but LegalZoom is not the place. As Tim was saying, it needs to be individualized. LegalZoom, I'm sorry, is not the place for this. You need a lawyer, and you need somebody, whether they're a general lawyer or a traditional estate planner or an elder law attorney, you need somebody with a strong connection with elder law, because they're dealing not with the death and taxes issue so much as they are with the issues of how do we age and how do we deal with these things. And the one thing that Tim said that I want emblazoned on all of your brains, and that is that as we have age oftentimes, as we have Alzheimer's or other issues, other disabilities, we need someone to act on our behalf. You can't be out there floating on the ocean and nobody can do anything for you, okay? That doesn't work. So we absolutely have to have somebody who can act on your behalf. And so I would say this. Oh, that's just a phone. Okay, sorry. I thought they were pulling out the cane. So one other thing that I do want to say, though, before I finish is when we're talking about powers of attorney, I'm sure many of you know that there's a healthcare power of attorney, as Tim was talking about, and there is a financial power of attorney or a property power of attorney or business power of attorney, okay? There are some things that I would like you to think about and that I would like you to avoid, okay? One of them is springing powers of attorney, okay? And as Tim was saying, you want a healthcare power of attorney in which the agent can act now. Believe it or not, there are healthcare powers of attorney that are springing, and they require that the doctor attending you certify in writing, in his or her professional opinion, and sometimes two doctors, that you are disabled, okay? If you get a hold of the statutory short form for Iowa, you will find that that is the case. So be careful what form you use or what form your lawyer uses. Another issue is talking about revoking them, okay? And let me back up. Elder law attorneys will say this: if you don't trust your agent when you're able, why would you trust your agent after you're disabled? And that is not a question, that's a rhetorical question, okay? Elder law attorneys think that springing powers of attorney are the devil's work, okay? We got to the point where we no longer revoked prior powers of attorney because people, as they might get into dementia, become paranoid. And so somebody would go to one law office when I was practicing law. They'd go to one law office, they'd have documents done. Maybe the law office was helping them. We had one where the lawyer's secretary was named as the agent. And then, of course, the person got paranoid, started accusing the Wells Fargo Bank, sitting in the lobby and accusing the Wells Fargo Bank of stealing all their money. They got her out of there real fast. Didn't like the lawyer's secretary, and so she shows up at what was then my law office. Well, we know darn well that it's only a matter of time before she thinks that we're the devil, okay? So we made a power of attorney in favor of her niece in Germany, but we did not revoke the prior power of attorney. When she eventually got back together with the first lady from the first lawyer's office, we made sure we contacted them and said, your power of attorney, your old power of attorney, whether she can do anything now or not, is still fully valid. So be very careful about powers of attorney that revoke others. It sounds good, but it's not realistic. We like to see powers of attorney, and this is when we're doing the business that we do in patient advocacy, we see that. We don't do legal documents. It has to be done by actual licensed attorneys. We'd like to see them 3 deep. Don't name Jamie Long as your power of attorney. What happens if he becomes disabled or dies? We like to see powers of attorney at least 3 deep, okay? We also want to see powers of attorney that are properly executed. A lot of the stuff that comes off online is not. And, you know, you might as well have nothing. In the financial powers of attorney, we like to see extra powers. So I would caution you against the statutory short forms. The statutory short form in Illinois and many states has a little list, and it says, here's some things that I name my agent can do. So if Tim's my agent, he can do real estate transactions, and he can get into my bank accounts, and he can take care of my stock, and he can do all of this stuff. Then it comes to a second paragraph. If there's anything, Jamie, you don't want Tim to do, either say it here or line through that, okay? And then it says, if there's anything additional that we haven't said, I want you to make sure you put it in there. And when we're dealing with dementia, whether it be in elder law attorney offices or attorney's offices, or whether it be in an organization such as ours, we want to have gifting powers and we want to have self-dealing powers in those powers of attorney. Now, you will run into lawyers who say, oh my God, that's a license to steal type power of attorney. And the answer is, it can be. So, as Tim said, you better make sure that you trust whoever it is you name. Or you can build in some things that take care of that. But if I have a house that's in joint tenancy with my wife, and I go into care, and my wife is advised, get Jamie's half into your name, for varying reasons. We won't go into those tonight. And she has a power of attorney, but she does not have gifting and self-dealing provisions. She can't get the job done without a court order. So from an elder law standpoint, most of them will say, absolutely, you've got to have it. And elder law attorneys like to laugh about people who are in law enforcement and who rail against all this stuff until they themselves deal with it in their own family. And a friend of mine from California always used to say, then they become real believers or real fast. The final point I would make is that in the healthcare powers of attorney, unfortunately, there was a movement in Illinois a few years ago in which the medical profession said they're too complex. And so they simplified the issue in terms of what you call the living will portion. And it basically says, I want to be kept artificially alive in a vegetative state or however, whatever state, or I want my doctor to decide whether or not I should continue to live. And that can be, whether they think I've got, quality of life. Most people that we know want their family member to make that, okay? And so we never used, and the attorneys that I know never used the statutory short form in Illinois. They modify it. And so it says that if the doctor says that it is appropriate to withhold or withdraw life support, then I want my agent to make that decision, not the doctor. I want my agent to make that decision. And that is a piece that, well, you sit on the Elder Law Section Council, don't you? That's a piece that I can remember the Elder Law Section Council went nuts with when this got forced through the legislature without even their knowledge. But it's there, and it needs to be dealt with. So you have to get the as Tim says, you've got to get the documents that fit your situation.
Thank you, Jamie. Questions for Jamie? I have one that I think we've kind of heard bantered about here a little bit, but maybe take a minute because I think it ties into exactly what you were saying, and tell us, what is capacity from a legal standpoint and why is it important? Anybody?
Yeah, so it depends on what you mean by capacity. You can have capacity to contract, you can have capacity, you can have testamentary capacity for a will, you can have capacity in terms of a power of attorney.
And these are all a way of saying have the mental wherewithal to make these particular decisions?
What do you call it when you're in the hospital and you have to make decisions?
Decisional.
Yeah, so decisional capacity, it's basically what it is in capacity when it comes to a power of attorney. And why this comes about is because doctors, medical professionals, they must receive informed consent before they perform an operation. So in order to receive that informed consent, they have to receive that from somebody who has decisional capacity. This is a medical determination. Now, I don't want you to be confused between capacity and competency. And what I mean by it's a medical determination is because a doctor is going to assess whether you have capacity. They're going to have to analyze you and then write in their medical records that you have that capacity to make decisions. And basically, all it really means is that you understand the action that you're taking, and you understand the risks and the consequences of that action.
So how do
Thank
you, sorry.
No, go ahead.
So how do you decide when someone, say, has Alzheimer's and you have them in there to sign these legal documents? How are they able to do that? You know, if you have.
So if they're signing the legal
if
documents in
they're signing-
my office.
So say I'm my mom's power of attorney,
Mm.
and she has Alzheimer's. Is it legal for her to sign that? I mean, she would sign anything. She would sign anything.
Yeah.
So this is
So
before your mom's power of attorney. This is signing the documents to name you power of attorney.
Right. Now, but I guess I'm asking, because like,
And I should mention that everybody, first of all, is presumed to have this decisional capacity. If they come into my office and I think they might lack that, I'll say, okay, go see a doctor and make sure that you have that decisional capacity before you come back to my office and we sign legal documents.
because clearly if we're taking some of these steps because of their mental state, that we're worried about where it's gonna go, then they're already partway there.
Yeah, so that's why I think it's important to first have them assessed by a doctor.
Different kinds, as Tim is saying, there's different kinds of capacity. The decisional capacity means I can make medical decisions for myself. You will see the hospitals sometimes send in a neuropsychologist for the narrow determination as to whether or not this patient has decisional capacity. And the one thing I'm going to disagree a little bit with Tim, and it's because it's vague. In my opinion, and in many people's opinion, capacity is not a medical decision. It is a legal decision. However, you will see the laws talk about you have to have a doctor certify this or that. And you generally want to keep it out of the doctor's office for varying reasons, because it can be a little too set in stone. When somebody is partially along the way, you evaluate them. And if somebody if they know their spouse, they know they want their spouse to be able to transact business for them, they may have enough capacity to sign that power of attorney. The traditional for testamentary is that you know the natural objects of your bounty, which means your presumptive heirs. You have an idea of what you have for an estate, and you have an ability to put together some kind of an estate plan. That's traditional testamentary or will capacity.
So if the lawyer's comfortable.
Right.
with it,
Donative capacity may be different. Generally speaking, capacity means that you understand the consequences of what you are doing. So if I have somebody, when I was a lawyer, if I had somebody come in who already had a power of attorney, and we were just expanding it to add gifting and self-dealing, it didn't take as high a level. And it also is a practical decision on the lawyer's part as to who's likely to contest this. So it's not just pure, and it's not just educational. It's an everyday decision.
I think it also speaks to the importance of starting this plan early, right?
Oh yeah.
There's no reason that you need to put yourself in a gray area first, right? To get some of these decisions made. My wife says that there are many ways that I lose capacity at home all the time, but we have healthcare powers of attorney as well. So, and I think I had capacity to sign those documents. So you don't have to wait until you're uncomfortable having to make that decision, I think is the broad takeaway.
The other thing too, I just want to mention too, for everybody in this room, like Alzheimer's, everybody's journey is different. Same thing's going to be with legal. And that's the best part. I'm out there preaching about Tim all the time because his services are free to just call him. You guys call him. I can't stress enough, give Tim a call. And if he's too busy, I'm sure he'll mention elder care and some others, but definitely call Tim. Don't let that resource go to waste, and don't be like, I'll wait till next week. Because how many of us say that, and then next week comes, I'll wait till the following week. Literally, call him tomorrow, make an appointment. Tim's like, Joe, shut up. But Anyways, I can't stress it enough because again, you're not gonna regret talking to him.
Thank you. Okay, we'll save a few more questions. Oh, I'm sorry, one more. Yeah, go ahead.
Question for Jamie. So Golden Care does the elder care law specifically, or?
Question was, I think, what exactly does Golder Care do?
We are not a law office. We are not a medical office. We are not an accounting office. We do not practice law, medicine, accounting. We do not sell financial product, although my wife has licensure to do that. Our mission and our job at Golder Care is to help you bridge the gaps in managing mom's long-term care. We don't render the care, okay? We may be doing care management, et cetera, et cetera. But what we do is something we call total patient advocacy. It is private patient advocacy, and it attempts to deal with all of the issues. So we have enough expertise in-house that we can see that broad picture, but then when we need something more, I mean, we don't have everything, so we are able to drill down for the various, we have, connections with the community, and we can get you to where you need to be, et cetera, et cetera. But that's what we do. So Golder Care may come in as a witness to a will. Does this person have sufficient capacity? You, Madam Witness, do you think this person does or not? In a will, it's fairly clear. It says, that I believe the person be of sound mind and memory and blah, blah, blah. In the other documents, it's not as clear. And it differs. But if you've got people with experience who can testify, whether they're doctors or not, ideally, as Tim is saying, ideally you have a doctor because the law favors the doctor. But it probably is really ultimately a legal decision. One of the things that I always used to say was, these end-of-life documents, these are medical documents. Why do lawyers do them? Because third-party payers never paid the doctors to do them. The doctors don't want to do those because they don't get paid. Now, they do get some from Medicare now for helping you with the posts and the end-of-life documents, such as advanced directives. But historically, the doctors got nothing for that. And so it all ended up in the law office. And there's a logic to that. I mean, if you're doing your estate planning, your life planning and your estate planning, and well, what about end of life? It all kind of goes together. So these documents are kind of hybrid. They're medical documents, they're legal documents, and you'll get different perspectives from different places. Now, a lawyer can't sign a post. That's a physician's order. But a lawyer could help have input on that, when it's appropriate or when it's not, or what should go in it.
And I appreciate that. And let's move on finally to our last speaker. We kept you here. She's like, oh my gosh, am I ever going to get to talk tonight? Carly John is with us. Carly, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do? Here, if it doesn't.
I mean, I'm a really loud talker, so I know. Okay. Is that okay? Okay. Hi. Good. So I will be short, sweet, and simple because these men are very knowledgeable and educational, and I want to make sure everybody can get their questions in for them. But like I said, I'm Carly Johnett. I am from Lightspeed Community Services. We are an 8-county service, but for the 2 programs that I'm going to be talking about tonight, Adult Protective Services and Community Care Coordinators, they are specifically for Whiteside, Lee, Carroll, and Ogle. I am the outreach coordinator, so I am stationed out of out of Rockford, but I'm trying to be more, more with Rock Falls and the services they do down here. I feel like sometimes, because up in Rockford, we forget that we have another location down here. So I'm really excited to be here tonight. I feel like the outreach coordinators never do their job, so I want to make sure I do my job right. So I am here, as I said, I handed out the Adult Protective Services flyer. I will start off with that. Many of you might have experienced this. I am a newish parent, so I even experienced this, but burnout is so real. I just did a caregiver program actually, and burnout is one of the biggest things we talked about in that stress class. And I never want an individual to go too far past the point that they end up in this category. It's very simple and easy to do so. You might not know you're already in it, but there are 7 different types of like abuse and neglect that I just kind of want to talk about, just because I feel like the physical and the emotional and more with seniors, the financial are talked about. Those are the most common 3. But there is also sexual abuse, confinement, so restraining or isolating that individual to like a bed or their home. There's also actually passive neglect. So a caregiver or home care aide failing to give you what you need, like food, shelter, access to assistive devices, and then willful deprivation. A caregiver or home care aide, or even just a family member, deliberately depriving you of things you need, like medication, shelter, food. If you are in a situation or you know anybody, please call us at LifeScape and please report this. Mainly every service care provider signs a thing when they step into employment stating they are a mandated reporter. I myself am one. Anybody that steps into our agency that's an employee or volunteer, I make them sign a form stating that they are a mandated reporter. Our phone number is at the bottom, but I can give it out loud right now. It is 815-490-1124. 2025, excuse me. Thank you. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. But I will say that 1124 is the same right next door, like literally the same person. So it would have gotten you to the same place, I promise. I promise. Yeah. But it will get you right. We have 4 wonderful caseworkers. We just got a new supervisor. We did have our supervisor just recently pass away actually. So we are happy. We have 4 wonderful strong ladies that have about 130 active cases right now in those 4 counties. A case can last up to 2 years. You will start with an initial intake, go to an assessment. If they see that it needs to continue, go to an assessment. And then from there, every month, you're re-evaluated. The situation is followed up with every month. More immediate cases are way more frequent follow-up than that. So then just the second service that we have is our community care coordination. We have about 7 caseworkers right now with them. The main service that this is known for is connecting an individual with an in-home service that can do those homemaker services. In order to qualify, you do have to be a certain income and have low assets. You know, those situations, that financial situation is funky sometimes, but the low assets, and I do have the numbers here if anybody is interested or wants to know later, but it is for 60 and over. And you call our caseworkers again, we'll do the assessment, figure out what needs are not being met. Maybe you need assistance with bathing. They will find that maybe your loved one is more of a mild case of Alzheimer's or dementia. You know, they can still stay home by themselves. Maybe they just need that check-in every once in a while to help them do their medications in the morning. Or like I said, do a bath, do some cleaning. Cleaning is actually the most common and most popular service that is used for this. Meal preparation, toileting. It's about 25 hours a week is typically the max that they can do. But yeah, again, same number for that. Like I was saying, those 2 numbers kind of correlate and get to the receptionist. Okay, and I will do my best to answer questions. Joan hit me.
Back to adult protective services.
Yes.
If the dementia patient is being abused,
yes,
how do you help that patient?
How do they help the patient, or how does
like the adult protective. That's a great question. Yeah, sorry. So she asked a dementia patient, if an individual has Alzheimer's or dementia, keep saying.
And they're being abused
and they're being abused by their
A son
caregiver.
or a daughter or
Yep.
whatever. How can Lifescape intervene if you find out about it? If a neighbor calls to tell you that, what happens?
So like I said, they're gonna take their initial steps and start their investigation. They'll go in, do their assessments, and do whatever is possible to start where they're at. I am personally not a caseworker, so I'm gonna be honest. I know, I'm sorry, I am not, so please don't, I will take back any questions.
But what I'm getting at is if anybody here knows of a dementia.
So that's why they wanna call.
Patient that is being abused.
Yes,
so
call.
It's okay for people to call.
Yes, oh gosh, yes. Please call like that number, 815-490-1124 or 1125. Like I said, either or gets you to that front desk. Please call, you will get transferred. And I actually had an individual that called, got my phone number instead. And the caseworkers were right on top of getting a hold of them. So these 4 ladies are always on top of doing the intake. So Charity is the supervisor that just took over the whole department. It's Charity, and then Cheyenne just took over for Charity's spot. And then we just actually hired 2 new people, and I do not know their names right now.
I don't know where the office is.
So it's at 206 Dixon Avenue in Rock Falls. Yes. Like I said, I will take questions, and if I don't know the answer, I'm gonna be honest, and I will write it down and get back to you.
I have a specific question for Carly at all?
And if not, that's okay, because these guys are very educational.
I do want to bring up, for those who are caregivers, remember that if your loved one is in a facility and you think abuse is happening, please don't, if you have a concern, it's okay to call Adult Protective Services because they're going to investigate. Most times, it really is nothing that the agency is doing, but that one time that you think it's not, it could be. So they're going to be able to investigate it. And again, it's nothing against the facility, and you would know more about this than me if they say who put their complaint in, but I can't stress it enough because we have heard this where some people didn't say something and the agency was being neglectful. It does happen. So just make sure too that if your loved one's in a facility, it's okay to call too if you have a concern, right?
Oh, yeah, anybody that has a concern. No, any of those who are coming.
Call Carly for anything is basically the summary.
Don't let me.
Yes.
Is there a statute of limitations on financial exploitation?
Is there a statute of limitations on financial exploitation was the question. Ooh,
I'm not gonna lie, I don't know the answer to that. I'm gonna be 100% honest.
I don't either.
Do you either?
No, I don't know that either.
I'm sorry.
Generally speaking,
Come in
it's
October and we'll ask that question.
it's 2 years for personal injury in Illinois. For financial exploitation, I couldn't say. I'd have to look it up.
Yeah, I'm not aware either. I've never had it come up. There usually is a statute of limitations at some point. If you're talking about enforcing some things, you should say personal injuries, usually 2 years. What, contract was 10 years?
If it's written.
If it's written without, it's like 5 years. So you have those rules.
I'm sure there is one.
So
It probably is.
we are going on 7 o'clock. I know some of you need to get out of here, so I'm going to take a minute to pass the mic to Joan. Had a couple of things she wanted to share. And then whoever needs to leave is welcome to. Otherwise, we will take some time to ask some more questions for the panel. So go ahead, Joan.
My name is Joan Hermes, and I'm Executive Director of the CGH Health Foundation, which brought this to you tonight in partnership with Joe and the Alzheimer's Association. And we're just thrilled to be able to do this because every single one of you has a story. You've got questions, you've got needs. You are just crazy with how do I get more help. I know that. As Joe mentioned, or Sam mentioned, I went through that with my own mom. This is a big deal for all of us, and it is our heartfelt mission that as a foundation and as a hospital, we're going to try to make things easier. And one of the biggest things we're doing is creating a new dementia navigator position at the hospital. It's going to take us a couple months, but what it means is whether you're on the dementia journey already or you have a brand new diagnosis from your primary care physician, from one of our neurologists or elsewhere, and you happen to live here, we are going to have a point person available who is going to take you by the hand and help you through the next steps. She won't be helping you medically, she'll be helping solve all these hurdles that you're running into. And it will be, I say she, it could be a he. We have not hired the person, but that person will know so much about our local resources, our community care situation, our medical process. They will help get you started on that path to not going crazy because you don't know the answers. So pray for me that this is going to go quickly and we'll be able to get the funding to bring this person to our hospital, because of the many, many things we're doing, I really feel that this is going to be so impactful for all of us. And hopefully you're not going to say, oh, there's nothing here, there's no help. We're going to hopefully solve as much of that as we can. So that's my big news tonight. We haven't announced that publicly. And then in your packets, in your purple bags, I want you to pay attention. If you're interested, we have 3 support groups going, again, with the partnership of the Alzheimer's Association. They do the training. We really need volunteers, but most of you guys wouldn't be eligible because you must not be on a dementia journey currently while you are a volunteer leader of a caregiver support group. You must have already been passed. But we'd like to get them in all of our area towns: Morrison, Prophetstown, Milledgeville, Walnut, Dixon. We're even trying to help in Savannah. So we're trying to get a caregiver support group in each of the towns. And if you happen to live in any of those towns, I would love to hear of folks you think might be interested in doing that. So that's a big thing. So currently we have one in Polo, in Sterling, and in Mount Morris. Those are the 3. The other things I want to talk to you about were...
And Mount Morris, no, not Mount Morris, Sterling offers respite care while you go into the group free of charge.
So Morningside is the second Thursday of the month at 3 p.m. And I am one of the leaders, and Beth Sturck from the Whiteside County Senior Center, and then Kim Trotter, who is the Morningside administrator. We take turns leading, or sometimes we're all there. We're really enjoying it. We have about 5 or 6 folks who come on a regular basis, and we'd like to have a couple more. I think we can have about 10. But the beautiful thing that Joe mentioned, if you want to come and you need to bring your loved one with you, the Morningside staff will watch them while you are at the caregiver support group. Just like tonight, we have 2 individuals who came with an attendee at the workshop, and we have 3 nurses in one of the adjoining rooms taking care of them. We're very aware of this need, that you can't always go where you want to go. So we're trying to help with that. Another thing I'll just mention, but we have made no headway on this at all, we would love to get an adult daycare something going. And we used to have it at the senior center. We had another one through area churches. The senior center is interested in pursuing it, but we have to look at grant funding. So that's a little bit further down the road, but it's definitely on my list. So I just want to tell you folks, we want to do as much as we can. Tonight's panel was fantastic. I appreciate it so much. And this is a series. So October 6th and November 3rd are the next ones. We've got various ways that we communicated to you, whether you saw it on our email newsletter, our Facebook page, an ad in the paper, word of mouth, a news article, a flyer. We will try to get out as much information and promotion for the next ones. The October 6th one will be a financial focus. So we will have an insurance person, a banker, a CPA, a financial planner. Jamie's going to be back. He's the combination. Make sure I get everybody. We're having a caregiver speak as well. And we have an attorney. So we have another full slate of panelists for October 6th, here again at 5:30. And again, if you need to bring your loved one with you, we will have caretakers. Then on November 3rd, and Sam is going to be the main speaker, October 6th. Money Matters is his talk.
And
He's good. Isn't Sam great?
And some of you got a preview by accident, but you will be leaving with a financial workbook too, to actually do your own personal type plan.
It's an Alzheimer's Association program, and Sam is presenting it for them. So then November 3rd, the concluding one, this is about options for care. And what we mean by that is, how do you take care of your loved one? How long do you have them stay at home? Do they go to assisted living? What about respite care? What about nursing care? And Dr. Eric Coons, who is involved in our annual appeal this year, he's part of our medical division leadership, he will be the speaker. So as Joe was the speaker tonight, then Eric will talk about what he sees in his practice and what he helps families attempt to do as far as their care. Eric lost his mom the same year I lost my mom from dementia. And on that panel, we're not final with that panel, we'll have a nursing home administrator, a home nursing agency lead. Jamie's going to be back on that panel as well. And I asked Carly to have some of her folks from LifeScape come back, because we'll also talk about resources in much greater depth. What are our community resources? Like what she was mentioning, the meal planning, golden meals, those kinds of things. And we have someone coming from the senior center, and we had hoped to have someone from the Northern Illinois Area Agency on Aging, not Tim, but one of his counterparts, Jenny Snow. She's not available to be here, but the folks at the senior center oversee the grant funding that is available for folks that have dementia care expenses. So they're really well versed in that. So we'll have a couple people from the senior center. And then we're going to have Mark and Margaret back again to talk about their story and the kinds of things that they have done in relation to getting care and seeking care. So that's a wrap for everything that's coming, and I'm going to hand it right back to Sam.
Wait, before Sam does say something though that's unexpected, I do have to say to our volunteers from CGH, I'd like to give them a round of applause, because I have other hospitals around this state saying, how did you get CGH to go in on a dementia care coordinator? And it's CGH. They've been leading this charge. So I want to give a round of applause to them, because they are doing something other hospitals can't, and continue to give Joan the support, and CGH is your local heroes.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you for everybody for coming. Again, if anyone would like to stick around and have a few more questions, you're welcome to stick around and ask them. But thank you for being here. Hope to see you next month. Thank you.